Today, we talk week 2 of the preseason. We talk big, important injuries going on in training camp. We also talk all other news that is important as of Monday, August 19th. So stick around for all that and more. Welcome into the Dino Construction Podcast. We are back in full force. This is our first episode in about a month with all three of us. We are finally done with our summer vacations, moving across the world for me. David just working like a bum. Come on. And we are excited to bring all three of us back to you. David, go ahead and start us off with what happened in preseason week 2 that might be the most important thing that happened this weekend. It's up there.
Yeah, we like to start at the top with this with injury news as it's the worst part of the preseason, but it's also very relevant. Unfortunately, Jalen Warren left the game with a hamstring injury, and it sounds like he'll be out multiple weeks, might even miss week one. Something to monitor, something we don't like with soft tissue injuries going into the season. So definitely a little bit scary if you're counting on him. Hopefully he is back early on in the season and able to move past this.
Yeah, we've mentioned it before. Hamstring injuries are the ones that seem to linger the most. So hopefully they do actually hold him out for week one so that he is healthy the rest of the way. If you have Jalen Warren, that's what I'm personally hoping for. But there are still a few other things that are worth mentioning outside of injury. And the first is Colby Parkinson. He rested with the starters. And this is a relatively clear indication he should be the starting tight end for the Rams.
Not a guy that I'm excited about in any non tight end premium format. In best ball, certainly interested. If there's a substantial tight end premium, sure, he'll be on my roster. But in general, not a guy I expect to be a difference maker, not a redraft guy for sure. Gardner Minshew named the starting QB. I think we probably expected this. This is also the best case scenario for the offensive weapons. Not necessarily important for your super flex position. Sir, you can start him. You could have started AOC if O'Connell was the quarterback, but likely this is just more important for Devontae Adams and hopefully Brock Bowers than it is for the super flex position.
Yeah, as someone who probably has more Devontae Adams than I should, I'm pretty happy it's Gardner Minshew. Michael Pittman Jr. was wide receiver 15 in PPR points per game last year, scored over 15 points. I think Devontae's better than Michael Pittman Jr., so hopefully he can at least support one solid fantasy wide receiver. We've got some other guys we care about there, but I do agree. I think Minshew being the starter is the best case scenario for all of us with Devontae shares. Sticking with the Raiders, Zamir White surprisingly played into the second half in the game over the weekend. He was splitting work pretty evenly with Alexander Madison and Dylan Labe. Kind of hard to read into why that all happened, but it's definitely concerning. If he's your clear starter, especially at running back, there's really no reason to be playing in the second half of a preseason game. That's just a lot of risk. So maybe it's not as much of a lock as we all assumed.
Yeah, I've been a little bit lower on Zamir White, and part of it is due to the pass catching ability that he doesn't really seem to possess, didn't through college, and hasn't really seen in the NFL. And Labe, we know that he is a great pass catcher, and they're probably going to be behind in most of their games. They're not going to be a winning team. And if he's ceding any work to Alexander Madison, yeah, it could be pretty rough on a bad offense. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. The next thing we got is Jaden Daniels has been named the starter. We do care about this one. However, this was never really in question.
Yeah, no controversy with Daniels whatsoever. Honestly, it's just, yep, we knew that. Next question. Dotson did not have any big numbers in the same game. He ran routes on 11 of Jaden Daniels' 12 dropbacks, and he was on the field for 16 of the 18 snaps Daniels took. It seems like McLaurin and Brown will be the outside wide receivers, and Dotson will be the man in the slot. Talked about this last week some. That slot role can definitely be valuable. We talked about that in the Kingsbury attack. I don't like it. Luke McCaffrey's supposed to play that role, but could be potentially valuable. I'm mostly interested in it for best ball because I don't want to have to predict when he's going to be useful from the slot, but intriguing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, this will come up again in our next episode this week, but I think really all it is a sell window for Dotson. Looks like he might be a part of this offense, but Daniels probably won't be able to support a bunch of fantasy wide receivers. So after McLaurin, I'm not very interested in that room in general. One more thing on the Commanders, real quick, and kind of unfortunate news when we're talking about a rookie we like, Ben Sanat. He's only on the field for 3 of those 18 snaps that Daniels took, and those 3 snaps were all in 12 personnel, and he was lined up and tight on all 3 of those snaps. Ertz was out and we project him as the starter. Jesse Bates was on the field for all 18 snaps, so it seems like maybe even he is ahead of Sanat right now.
Yeah, and we've seen this from Ertz just last year with Trey McBride. Who Trey McBride, he had one of the best yards per route run stretches that we've seen once Ertz was out of the way. So just the fact that Ertz was still ahead of McBride when he's that good, he's still going to be ahead of Ben Sinnott, it appears. So yeah, definitely don't love to see that, and I'm probably less likely to take a shot on him in redraft, but don't love to see that. The next piece we got here is Demario Douglas only played in 3 wide receiver sets here with the Patriots.
Yeah, seeing that definitely limits his upside. Definitely makes you think he's probably not going to be a lineup wide receiver that you want to be counting on at all if you had any hope for him before that. Next, Kenny Gainwell played in all snaps on the first 2 drives and seems to be the backup, but Shipley has also looked good this preseason. We talked about this last week. So continuing to monitor this throughout. If we had to bet today, we'd say at least it looks like Gainwell will be starting the season with the RB2 role, but who knows where it will wind up by the time and if Barkley actually gets injured.
Yeah, they love Kenny Gainwell there, as we've talked about before. And I know the level of competition decreases significantly as you go throughout a preseason game. I'm not exactly sure who was out there when Shipley was out there, but I did see some plays. He looks pretty good, man. I think he's going to end up taking that job from Gainwell at some point, but I don't make that decision. And the people that do, like I said, seem to like Gainwell. So I'm not sure I'd bet on it. I think Shipley is better. Next guy that I love, one of my favorite prospects in this draft, one of everybody's favorite prospects in this draft. I'm not going out on a limb here by saying that. Malik Neighbors, he looked like that dude. 4 catches for 54 yards on 6 targets. There was a couple of very nice catches on not so great balls, which is something we're probably going to have to get used to this season. But man, he's the guy in that offense. He can take him to the next level. He might even be able to help Daniel Jones revitalize his career. He is that good.
Yeah, we've never really seen Daniel Jones have any sort of real wide receiver one. He's never had a wide receiver that's cracked 800 receiving yards, actually. So, yeah, maybe this will let us see a little bit of what we saw from 2022 in Daniel Jones. But yeah, Malik never should be a target freaking hog in this offense, and it's good to see those signals here in week 2 of the preseason. Next thing we got here is Devin Singletary played all but 4 snaps in the first half. If this is indicative of his in-season role, it leads to optimism that he can volume his way to some success, even if his ceiling is limited. It is worth noting Tyron Tracy, he was out this week with that injury scare. Thankfully, that didn't turn out to be anything season ending, but we still expect Devin Singletary to have this job, and all signs are still pointing that way. And I know that this is a guy that you two have been pretty excited about in the last couple of weeks.
Well, I mean, maybe not quite like excited, but it's more like when you go to Taco Bell and like you log into your Taco Bell app and you see you have like a free taco, like that type of excitement. It's a good value. It's like, look at this. It's like this should cost more, is more like what we think. But yeah, we're a little excited. The trio of wide receivers in Houston, we noted last week Dell did not play in 2 wide receiver sets. This week in 2 wide receiver sets with the starters on the field, Collins played all 7 snaps, Dig played 5 snaps, and Dell played 2. Obviously, small sample again, but this is a slight improvement and shows some potential for him to make it onto the field in these spots, which if he can, even this percentage, even this 20-ish percentage of the time, we're pretty excited about that. Definitely something to keep monitoring throughout the preseason, but encouraging.
Yeah, especially for me, who's been out on a tank tail limb here for at least the last couple of months. Definitely a big fan of his. Big fan of this whole offense in general. But if he can get at least some work in 2 wide receiver sets, that'll be huge for him. Next guy, Jermaine Burton, someone we noted last week, did not come into the game until late. He actually got the starting nod this week. Important to point out that they rested 4 wide receivers and had another out with injury. The rested ones, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Trent Irwin, Andre Yoshivas, and Charlie Jones did not play with an injury. So just a muddy depth chart. We like the upside of Burton, still willing to hold him, but kind of hard to make any assumptions as to who that third wide receiver is going to be.
Yeah, the fact that he came into the game so late in the week 1 preseason game was unfortunate to see. If you're a Burton believer like I am, maybe it's just because they're just having him earn it, which if that was what they're trying to do, I think he did earn it in week 1 because he had the most receiving yards in week 1 from a rookie because we saw some big plays from him in that week 1 game. So at least this does seem like a little bit of a step in that direction, but it might mean that he gets off to a little bit of a slower start than I might have initially expected. But we're trending the right direction now. Next up, we got Carson Steele seemed to have passed the Derek Prince on the Chiefs depth chart. Makes him worth a free ad if he's still on waivers. No, I mean, Deneric Prince, he was the talk of the town just a week or 2 ago. Oh my gosh, he's the RB2. Seems like that's gonna be pretty up in the air at this point.
Let me just check real quick. Gonna put on some waiver ads. Actually, put some in over the weekend already. If Carson Steele's available there for free, he's on that trending sleeper players list. So other people will be putting it in. If your fab resets, might be worth a couple fab because other people might be putting a zero fab bid in, and fab's just gonna reset any day now. Probably not gonna have too many other big moves. So little minor fab drop even potentially, as long as your fab does reset. So both Xavier Worthy and Rasheed Rice looked pretty good. Both were on the field for 13 of the 14 snaps Mahomes was playing. Worthy had a 33% target share, and Rice had a 42% target share. They both also benefited from not having Hollywood Brown on the field. Likely that will influence Worthy more than Rice. However, it's impossible to know how it will finally shake out. I think I'm more excited about Worthy based off of this, just the fact that he's establishing some rapport with Mahomes. And the other thing worth noting is that even that third wide receiver spot seemed to not have that big revolving door that it had in previous years, post Tyreek Hill, where instead, even though Hollywood Brown was out, Justin Watson just seemed to fill that void for the most part. So also a very good chance that we just see the three wide receivers as long as they are actually healthy, Hollywood Brown, Worthy, and Rice, essentially being on the field all the time and not having so much of that revolving door. How will Kadarius Toney lose them games?
He's gonna be a running back, didn't you hear? I'm kind of excited to see Mahomes with a real receiving group again, one he can build chemistry with. He already has it with Rice. Looks like he and Worthy are getting on the same page a lot. Kind of unfortunate Hollywood's missing some time here, but he's a professional. He's been in the league a while. I expect him to get back into the swing of things pretty quickly. Definitely a fun room to look at, though, and difficult to predict for sure, especially if Rice doesn't get suspended.
Right, and that's what I was gonna say was it seems like Rice, the suspension won't be coming this year. So if you have him on your dynasty team, I think if you bought low on him or you held him through, I think that things are looking pretty good for this year, I think.
Yeah, definitely, probably undervalued in redraft right now, and with a lot of home league drafts going on, that's, definitely something worth mentioning. Next guy, Israel Abanikanda making an appearance here on our show. Looks like the RB4 on the Jets, so he might actually get cut and land somewhere else where he could be useful. So if he is out there and you've got an extra bench spot, might as well pick him up. I don't know that I'd spend any fab on him, but, if he finds himself in a more favorable position, he actually could be kind of useful. So, just something to check on there.
Yeah, I think that the one spot I might actually be interested in is probably the Cowboys. Abanikanda, just based on what he did, which was nothing, I think that I'm probably not interested unless it is a juicy spot like that. But yeah, I could definitely see a potential shot for that. But next up, we have Malachi Corley played no snaps in two wide receiver sets. So it looks like he's not going to be fantasy relevant outside of best ball. And I think this does make sense because I think, profiles mostly is just a slot kind of player, but definitely notable that that is how it is trending at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And hard to see a role for him there outside of injury. Next up, Trey Benson did not play a single snap on third down or in the 2 minute drill. This definitely limits his upside, even if he does end up winning the starting job, whether it's through merit or a James Conner injury. If Amari DeMercado, whoever else is there, is getting the third down role, getting the 2 minute drill, then at best, Trey Benson is a fringe RB2, RB3 with upside when he scores. So kind of disappointing, especially because a lot of people are really excited about his athleticism.
Yeah, I will say Benson did look pretty good in his snaps this week. Last week, heard a lot of people concerned. It looked like maybe he was thinking a little too much, wasn't hitting the hole very hard or with a lot of authority. This week, it looked like maybe he was playing a little more in rhythm, saw some nice runs. I just kind of think this is one of those don't overreact in either direction things about the preseason. Like, he's a rookie player. He had a little rough game last week, had a solid game this week. He's going to be what he is. He's back up to Connor. If Connor gets hurt, he's definitely worth starting, but not a whole lot that I'm reading into this personally.
Yeah, I think it's just more of if they think that he could be a third down back, if they think he has a chance to work in the 2 minute drill, preseason exposure to that, I think, is the perfect chance to figure out, like, can he do it? So the fact that they're not trying him in that role at all in the preseason just makes me worried that they think he can't do it.
I definitely don't think he'll have that role this year, but could just be easing him into things as well. So not willing to give up on the full bell cow role, though it is not likely, really not likely for anyone in the NFL these days, though. Next bit of news, another rookie we are following, Keon Coleman, started and played all the snaps with the starters, which did not include Josh Allen, but there were several other starters out there with him. He kind of had a mixed bag from everything that I've read, from everything I've seen, but we do expect him to be out there a lot, and it's kind of all about how he and Josh Allen work together. So without him on the field, I'm kind of withholding judgment.
I am a little concerned just based on the performance. This was a tweet from Jacob Gibbs, and it said Keon Coleman has run 32 routes this preseason. He has 6 targets for 2 catches and 20 yards. That hasn't been great to start. I mean, he's still just a rookie and he's learning, so I wouldn't completely panic yet. But the fact that he's playing the snaps with the starters is nice because Matt Collins, there was a case that he might play a decent amount of the X wide receiver snaps. But I do think it makes some sense because guys like Shakir, Kincaid, Samuel, Curtis Samuel, that isn't really going to play the X wide receiver snaps. So I'm kind of mixed on this. I think it's good though that he's playing ahead of Matt Collins at least. Next up, we have Van Jefferson appears to be the number 2 wide receiver in Pittsburgh based off usage. He led in the snaps with the starters with 20 to Pickens 18 and had 4 targets from Russell Wilson. This isn't the first time I've seen Van Jefferson get talked about. It actually was Arthur Smith on the Pat McAfee show was talking about wide receivers outside of George Pickens, and the first guy he named was Van Jefferson.
However, the Steelers' offense looked anemic, so I don't know how much we care about Van Jefferson. Actually, I do. I don't care unless it's best ball. With Russell Wilson playing the whole first half and only putting up 3 points and going 8 for 10 for 47 yards, Justin Fields looked a little better statistically, but he also didn't even lead the offense to any points and was playing in the second half against worth competition, etc., in a preseason game against guys who probably won't make the roster. So it's really hard to read into anything besides uh-oh.
That's it. That's it there. Just
That's it.
that's probably fair. Yeah, I've been on the camp. Russell Wilson is the starter here, and I think I'm still there. For fantasy, we'd love it to be Fields. Don't get me wrong. I just think Wilson will make less mistakes, and I think that'll be important. I don't really see either of them being super successful, so I could see both getting a little bit of play. But the Steelers have won games with worse at quarterback. If they win enough games to be in playoff contention, I don't see them making a quarterback switch. So whoever they go with is probably going to be the guy for at least a little while, especially if they can score some points. Moving on, though, Caleb Williams continues to impress. I'm sure if you follow football, if you're watching this, you follow football, so I'm sure you've seen some of his throws. Kind of what we expected. As a Packers fan, I'm not loving this, but seems like maybe the Bears found their guy. Just a little bit of information about who's playing with him, though. He's played 29 snaps with his big 3 wide receivers, all still in the game or active. Obviously not in the game on every play, but still playing in that game. Snap counts for those 3: DJ Moore at 26, Keenan Allen at 25, Rome Odunze at 18. Kind of right around what we're expecting, I think. Another maybe more interesting but less useful, just because neither of these guys really matter. But another thing kind of interesting, Gerald Everett has 29 snaps with Caleb in the preseason, where Komet only has 19. Seems like maybe Everett is the starting tight end there.
Yeah, you better watch out, David. Caleb Williams is coming for your Packers, and it's going to be probably not this year. But I
That's a
think,
good team, man. They're
yeah,
making me a little
yeah.
nervous.
Honestly, I would start to be a little bit nervous myself too if I were you.
You guys could fight for second place.
Oh, yeah, the Lions, they should still be the favorites to win the division, but yeah, Caleb Williams, he looks very, very good. I am pretty concerned about Cole Kmet of all this. I mean, if I have any shares of him at all, which I don't, thankfully, I would be trying to sell him as soon as possible because that is not good, especially because we already knew that they had 3 really good wide receivers and that he was going to be squeezed for targets anyways. Um, Keenan Allen, I mean, he's still getting a high snap count, more than Rome Odunze. I think that is notable. Odunze, he had a big play. He also had a 16-yard carry and a touchdown that he had his foot out of bounds on. So I'm still feeling pretty optimistic about him there. Next up, we have Chargers rookie Kamani Vidal made his preseason debut this weekend, and he looked pretty decent with 49 yards on 11 carries, and he added 3 targets for 2 catches for 8 yards. Now this is really, really nice to see because it was looking like maybe he won't even make the team because there was an athletic speculation article put out about the depth chart. They said that they think he was going to miss the 53-man cut, which I think that was kind of hard to see. But thankfully, he got out there and he did look good.
Yeah, I mean, we all remember Javante was going to get cut too. Speculation, speculation. Got to see what actually happens, who they give carries, etc. to. Love to see it because I have some Vidal shares. Next up, Brendan Rice on the Chargers as well. Played every snap with the starters. It's definitely interesting, But Herbert did not play, so take this with a grain of salt. Still worth monitoring.
Yeah, we'll see how that receiving core shakes out. Definitely interesting that Rice was the guy, though. I think he played ahead of Chark even. So maybe it's a battle for X between Rice, Chark, and Quentin Johnson. Just world beaters right there. Moving on, though, actually some live viewing experience for me. I was at the Packers Broncos preseason game. Did get to see Bo Nix look pretty darn good. Played in rhythm, had some accurate throws. And look, the Broncos played their starters and the Packers didn't, but it definitely looked like ones versus twos out there. And if you're on the one side of that, that's all you can do. So that's what they did. They ran it up and down the field. Nix had a touchdown called back on a scramble play where he was just past the line. It was originally called a touchdown, ruled overruled, and as it should have been, but it was a nice play, just a little learning experience for him there. Stidham didn't look too bad when he came in, but I definitely think we're trending towards Knicks as the week one starter there.
I would tend to agree. Statistically, this week he looked even better than last week. I have heard some concerns about just how his footwork looked in the pocket. It just looked heard that it looked messier than any of the rookie quarterbacks, but he still did what we thought he would. He was really good in the quick game. We saw the Marvin Mims touchdown the week before. That was just on a line to the outside. So yeah, I think he's looked pretty good overall, and I think that they should name him as the starter week one. But moving on to injury news that didn't happen in the game. Now, there's the JJ McCarthy injury, and I know it's been talked about, but it was the news was released about him being out for the year after we recorded, unfortunately. So we want to have a short discussion on the value on JJ McCarthy. Now, looking over at Keep Trade Cut, it's had a little bit of time to season, thankfully. But he is the number one faller on Keep Trade Cut, which makes sense. He's out for the entire season, so you're not going to get any production from him this year at all. And he is one spot ahead of Bryce Young at QB 19. Bryce Young's at QB 20. And I think that might even fall a little bit more. But I really am curious about what you guys think about JJ McCarthy because I think in a rebuild, I'm still very willing to buy him, especially if his value is a little bit down from where it was pre injury.
Yeah, if I can get a depressed value on him, I'm willing to ship perhaps like what I expect to be a late, like guaranteed late 25 first. There's no way this team makes the playoffs in his direction. I think you probably almost have to ship something around the value of a late 25 first to get him. But I'm pretty willing to do that, whether it's like a wide receiver, a running back, a different quarterback in that range, like a Bryce Young type, shuffling a Will Levis, that type of other young QB who I think we just maybe are less believing in because it could be the weapon situation or just the fact that they like mayonnaise in their coffee, whatever it is that we don't like them for. But yeah, I'm pretty in. I plan actually this weekend I'm gonna go put in some offers across my portfolio to see if I can up my exposure a little bit.
Yeah, and I think if you have him on a team, hopefully you weren't competing and counting on him because his job wasn't guaranteed anyways. So you're probably just in a situation where you got to hold. If you were counting on him, hopefully you can pivot to someone else. But like I said, that probably wasn't your situation. I've got him on a contender. Thankfully, he was my QB4 there, so I don't really have to do anything except put him in IR. And I had a couple discussions going on with him as a potential trade candidate, but those are kind of in the tank now. I'm not going to get anywhere near the value that I was hoping for, so I'm just going to hold personally if I have him on my team.
Yeah, I haven't been the highest on JJ McCarthy. I thought he was, I was somewhat around market on my viewpoint of him, but I could definitely see a narrative where next year we're looking at, oh, well, Jordan Addison, he's a little bit older. TJ Hawkinson is now fully healthy, and Justin Jefferson is there. And I could see a scenario where he starts to get steamed up as, oh, he's going to be the 2025 breakout candidate. So even if I don't really have a ton of faith in JJ McCarthy, maybe if you don't, you could still buy and then sell him before the 2025 season, I believe.
Yeah, don't hate that either. Speaking of Jordan Addison, he had an injury scare, was carted off, just ended up being an ankle injury that right now, speculatively, does not seem like it's going to keep him out of week one. Of course, re-aggravation, etc. Still could, but glad he dodged one, especially whenever you see someone carted off the field.
Yeah, I think there was at least a couple hours where we thought he might be missing the season.
Would have been a real bad week for Minnesota.
Man, it's been a rough offseason, and like I'm a Packers fan, and my heart goes out to them. They've had some rough news. So yeah, anyways, definitely a rough lead into the season for Vikings fans. So we'll see how that season goes. Moving on to more NFC North injury news. Jameer Gibbs had a hamstring strain It is minor, and he's only expected to miss 1 to 2 weeks, be ready for week 1, but it is a hamstring injury going into the season. We don't like to see that, so just something to monitor. Hopefully, they're smart with him and they rest him until he's 100%, but, definitely some re-injury risk involved there.
Yeah, if I have Jahmyr Gibbs on my team, I pray to God that he's not practicing by next week because I want him to be fully healthy, and we know how these things can linger. We've always mentioned that. And next up, we have Tyrone Tracy was carted off the field last week, but he was diagnosed with a low ankle sprain and could be ready for week 1. We heard possibilities of it being, a 3 to 6 week injury per PFF. However, Eric Gray, he's been looking really good, and the rookie is missing time, so Tracy may not be as good of a bet as people are hoping to be the RB2. It's just crazy to me that Tyrone Tracy's injury was just a low ankle sprain after getting out the air cast. Oh my gosh, how many times does the air cast get brought out and then it's just a low ankle sprain? I don't know. I'm thankful though, and I'm happy for the man as well.
Yeah, always happy when the injury is less severe. 100% true. And last injury note we have Alvin Kamara injured his back in practice Tuesday, the 13th. So last Tuesday. He probably would not have played much at all this preseason game at his age, but it's worth monitoring. And as an old man with a bad back right now myself, can relate. Hard relate, Kamara.
Looked like Taysom Hill took several snaps as the lone back and just, like, ran between the tackles, so that's interesting to me. And one thing that is not injury related, but I did kinda wanna mention, we just kinda forgot. I don't know if you guys saw this, but, Michael Penix did not play because the Falcons have seen enough from him, which makes no sense because he's the backup quarterback and he needs all the reps he can get. But maybe there's something more to that. I don't know. Just kind of really an interesting news piece that I wanted to make sure we mentioned.
I want to see this guy that he needs to sit for a couple of years because hasn't played enough ball. No, I'm just kidding. I want to see this guy play in the preseason if he's not going to be playing this year. I want to get an extended look at him, let him get work in this offense, get some more real live reps. So that makes absolutely no sense to me because especially if Kirk Cousins is down with an injury, you want to give him as much preparation as possible. So it doesn't make any sense to me, but maybe it's a good sign if they're saying good things, but that's just stupid to me.
I agree. Glad I'm not a Falcons fan. Said just a Lions fan who's finally good after suffering my entire life. So I can relate to suffering, JP. I really can. So thank you for joining us for another episode of the Data Construction Podcast. We hope you found this as useful for you as it was for us. Please make sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen and view. And from all of us here at the Data Construction Podcast, until next time.